أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome to another program tonight with us as we continue our series of on talks about the history and comparison of different Shia sects. Now, I hope that everyone's doing well and you're all staying safe, staying healthy, and inshallah soon we will be at some point resuming our face-to-face programs. So stay tuned, and we'd love to see you again one more time in person. Now, I would like to invite our dear brother Sayyid Taha Musavi to start our program with the holy verses of the Quran. First, he's going to be reciting ayahs from Surah Al-Mutaffifin. Please welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كلا إن كتاب الأبرار لفي عليين وما أدراك ما عليون كتاب مرقوم يشهده المقربون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كلا كتاب الأبرار لفي عليين وما أدراك ما عليون كتاب مرقوم يشهده المقربون إن الأبرار لفي نعيم على الأرائك ينظرون تعرف في وجوههم نظرة النعيم يسقون من رحيق مختوم إن الأبرار لفي نعيم على الأرائك ينظرون تعرف في وجوههم نظرة النعيم يسقون من رحيق مختوم ختامه مسك وإذا مروا بهم يتغامزون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Apologies, we had some interruptions in our audio earlier, but inshallah, we'll be able to follow through the slides. I'll pause a little bit, but you can review the slides later as if you want. Thank you again, Brother Taha, for yet another recitation. As I was listening, I was realizing how each time you've blessed us with your presence, you are gaining on your recitation skills are becoming finer and finer each time. MashaAllah. Jazakallah. Thank you for your time again. May Allah bless you and your family. Please recite another loud salawat for his well-being. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So here we are on the third session of talk series about various sects in within the Shia faith. Last week we were addressing Ismailis, and we had a couple of questions left, so we will be addressing those first, and then we'll continue with the Waqafis, inshallah. Let's see how we go with time, but don't feel shy. All your questions are anonymous, so you can ask anything you want. Go to the VBox app and type in the code and send your questions through. So on that note, I would like to invite the Sheikh Muhammad Waqar, who is going to continue on this topic. So welcome, Sheikh, and thank you so much. I'll pass over to you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبو القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, my apologies for last week. When we stopped the program, I realized that there were these questions, so it was my fault that we didn't answer them. Inshallah, I'll be more cognizant of questions coming in from this week. So the three questions that were raised last week, let's touch upon these as Brother Salah mentioned, and then inshallah we'll get into our talk. So first one, considering different beliefs in the number of imams between Shia sects, that Sunnis, or most probably Wahhabis, consider Shiism a deviation altogether. Other than hadith about the number of imams and their names, can we use any other thing to reason about the correctness of mainstream Shia Islam? So, yes, that is true. There are conflicting opinions about the number of the imams amongst the sects of Shia Islam. Obviously, from within the Ithna Ashari view, everyone accepts it being 12, but we have Zaydis, we have Ismailis, we have other groups that have different numbers of imams. So how do we know how many imams there are, and how do we know who the imams are? So both the number and the individuals within those numbers. And the only way that we could know this is through scripture. So no, we can't rationalize who the imam is and how many of the imams there are. We need to learn this through scripture coming from our prophet and from imams who have been established through the prophecy of our prophet. Yeah, so yes, that can be a source of confusion, but if people who are looking into Shia Islam, if they look into the sources of why we believe there's 12 imams and who the 12 imams are, then inshallah they would be satisfied with the proofs for the number 12 and the names of these 12 Imams through scriptural sources. All right, second question. Are these Ismailis having so much different beliefs considered Muslim, while they even put the Prophet's religion away and believe in a new Sharia? Yes, they are considered Muslim, and yes, they do believe in another Sharia, but they do accept the sources of Islam, the Quran and Hadith, and try to derive their opinion of what the Sharia is from the Quran and Hadith, right? So it's not like just out of the whims and desires of, the Imam of the Ismailis. It should be backed by scriptural sources. All right, third one. Is there any evidence or thoughts about how beliefs leading to different sects formed not long after the Prophet's death? All right, well, there is definitely evidence as to how. There's evidence of deviance. How the deviance occurred is a great topic to discuss. Some reasons would be personal desires, right? So just, like carnal desire. Some of them would be for political gain. Some of them would be because of individual differences with the Ahlul Bayt, with Imam Ali alayhi salam, who killed many people in battle, so maybe their family members, for instance. And also just ignorance from the Muslim Ummah as well. So I think that, that necessitates a full-on lecture looking at factors behind, ideological or theological differences that formed after the Prophet's death. It's a great question. And yes, I do have thoughts about it, but I would like to present it in a more researched answer than just kind of off the top of my head. But it's a good question. Hopefully we'll look into that, inshallah. All right, if there's more questions that you guys have, feel free to put them up here, and inshallah I'll get to them when they come. The topic today, as well, Brother Salar said, it's the Waqifis. So the Waqifis were, one of the forms of Ismailis, which they call pure Ismailism. And they believed that, what was it that they believed? They believed that the promised savior, right, was Ismail, the son of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So he went into occultation and he will return, right? So they call them the Waqifis. Now today, inshallah, we're going to start and we're going to talk about ghulu, or exaggeration. And we're going to spend a couple sessions speaking about this, because this, I feel, has more of a modern day relevance to our religion, so the way that we follow religion, right? Let's get into it, and then you'll see why I believe it has a relevance. And inshallah, we're just going to kind of go theory today, and then we're going to look into some different modern day sects of gulat, or exaggerators. Okay, so gulat are those who exaggerate in religion. Pretty clear. Some of them have exaggerated the status of the prophets or the imams, alayhim salam, despite the prophets and the imams being against this ideology. So they're putting the status, they're raising the status of the prophet or the imams, even though the prophet and imams are telling them, no, you're wrong, stop, right? This ideological movement has negatively affected many aspects of the Shia faith, especially in ilm al-rijal, or the science where we're trying to ascertain the trustworthiness of the transmitters of ahadith, of traditions. Now, there's many factors behind exaggeration, just as there's factors behind the deviation that was mentioned in that question earlier. People have exaggerated in all ideological beliefs. be they religious or not, right? The exaggerations have been about the beliefs of the sect or the ideology, communism, for instance, Christianity, Islam, whatever it is. The champions of the sect, so the prophets, the imams, the revolutionaries, whoever the person puts on a pedestal, and even the followers of the sect, right? So there's been exaggerations on multiple levels. There's two main classifications of the factors behind exaggeration. Factors from within the religion, for instance, excessive love of the holy figures, excessive love of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and ignorance of the rules of the religion itself. And then there's factors external to the religion. So for instance, enemies spreading exaggerated beliefs. Why? To solidify their position or to weaken the faith. So if, Muawiyah wants to be known as a very righteous figure in the Islamic world, he falsifies traditions and exaggerates his status, and he tries to make people put him on a pedestal that the Imam or the Prophet should have. And then those people exaggerate, and they become ghulat when it comes to Muawiyah, right? Or some enemies maybe in the modern day will try to insert practices or beliefs that are abhorred, that are considered disgusting, that are considered deviant in modern day society, and that would make people uneasy about Islam. It would make people feel that Islam is not the religion that they should be following, right? So they're actually trying to harm Islam by inserting exaggerated beliefs or practices. Okay. Regardless of how the exaggerated beliefs come about, both causes of exaggeration lead to the same result, an altered form of the religion. So the religion loses its purity. Both of these factors have existed from the early days of Islam and affected Shia Islam particularly. Due to this, the Imams alayhim salam did not allow these ideological sects to formulate and persist. The Imams alayhim salam would teach the correct form of religion and would elucidate on the negative outcomes of ghulu, of exaggeration. That being said, right, there's been some long-lasting effects of the ghulat, of these exaggerators. For instance, the existence of an altered version of Shia Islam, which has been used by some Sunni, some Orientalist researchers, orators, speakers. Why? To put the Shia faith down. As they could not differentiate between the ghulat, the exaggerated form or beliefs of the religion, and mainstream ideology. But more likely, they knew the difference, and they picked out something that would kind of fit with what they're trying to say, right? So, for instance, like I remember, and I think I've mentioned this story before, when I first gave lectures, first time I went to deliver Muharram lectures in Scotland, a Wahhabi would come to my lectures, pulled me aside, gave like a whole elaborate plan, put a book in front of me that was completely anti-Shia, and was a book that he wanted me to read to basically change my religion, right, in Muharram. What a victory it would have been for him. Now, in that book, they referred to very non-mainstream views about Shia Islam. So they even had some views, some like Alawi views, that said that the Shia consider Imam Ali alayhi salam to have been the true prophet, and the prophet and like Angel Jibreel made a mistake, a'udhu billah, went to Rasulullah when he was supposed to go to Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali alayhi salam. And this is obviously a belief that even takes people outside of the fold of Islam, let alone just being exaggerated. It goes way beyond, right? But this person, you know, I'm not going to say he had a good understanding of Shia Islam, but this person, what he did is he picked a belief that exists amongst a very small minority within the Shia fold, and even these guys prior, even outside of the fold of Shia Islam, but very small minority, and then presents it as mainstream. And that's dangerous. And this happens. So when people come and they create new ideological kind of ripples in the religion, right? Obviously, the mainstream Shias will not accept them. They won't gravitate towards this belief. They won't be deviated by this belief. But it could harm people who are trying to look into Shia Islam and trying to find out what Shia Islam is, because they might be shown something and, you know, right at the beginning of their research that would just put them off altogether. So if, you know, a Sunni was interested in Shia Islam and said, you know, Shia Islam is a pretty big sect here, and what is this about? Love of the Ahlul Bayt? Let me look into this a little further. And then his teacher says, oh, don't look into them. They think Imam Ali alayhi salam is God, or they think Imam Ali was supposed to be the prophet. Then the guy would be like, you know what? I'm not even gonna look into this. That's crazy, right? So this is one of the negative effects that the ghulat or the exaggerators put in Shia Islam, is that the enemies of Shia Islam, ideological enemies, can utilize their opinions to tarnish the image of Shia Islam. Another way that they've affected the religion, and we're going to get into more of this later as well, is that they fabricated ahadith, they fabricated traditions, and they inserted them amongst the compilations of Shia ahadith, or they became inserted. So either some of them inserted them themselves, some of the traditions existed, and the compilers of the ahadith put them in the books by accident, right? The compilers of ahadith. So Shia hadith, which is something that hopefully you could look at academically even. Shia hadith, right, was obviously the words of the imams, and amongst the companions, they would teach each other what the imam said, right? Small books were made and were written and have been lost, but during that time, people like Sheikh Kunaini and others went and compiled traditions and put them in books. And then later on, people like Allama Majlisi and Hur Amali, they took these books and other books that were at their disposal, and even quotes from books that have been destroyed, and they compiled them in huge ahadith compilations like Bahar al-Anwar and Wasal al-Shia and other compilations, Mustadrak al-Wasal and other large compilations. So in these huge compilations, those who are compiling it, they made effort to reject ahadith that were presenting the exaggerated beliefs of Shia, of these exaggerators, okay? But some slipped through. Some of the differences of opinion of Shia theological beliefs may stem from some of these traditions, right? So for instance, about the knowledge of the imam and the extent of the knowledge of the imam, or the walayat taqwiniya of the imam, the differences of opinion that exist in, scriptural sources, or at least the explanations of certain scriptural sources, by different Shia scholars of the mainstream could have been influenced by the ghulat, by the exaggerators, right? And that's also something to look in. Now, arguably, the biggest negative effect of the ghulat has existed in ilm al-rijal, or the science that tries to ascertain the trustworthiness of the transmitters of the traditions that can be used to establish valid and invalid chains of narration, which can be used in turn to grade a hadith as being strong or weak. So this chain of narration is very important, and it's been hurt by the ghulat, right? And how has it been hurt? So many transmitters of traditions, right? Many of the people that exist within that chain of traditions, the chain of the hadith, right? So-and-so heard from so-and-so who heard from so-and-so who heard from so-and-so who heard from the imam, right? This chain, many of these individuals were accused of being ghulat, were accused of being exaggerators, right? Some people have determined that over 150 transmitters of a hadith have been accused of being ghulat. That's a huge number. So then scholars thereafter have to determine, what are we going to do with this? Are we going to throw away all of these hadith? Are we going to try to determine which accusations could be valid and which ones would be invalid, right? So the effect that an accusation has on the transmitter of the traditions is affected by certain characteristics, right? So for instance, the Qawmis, right? So the scholars who existed in Qawm at the time, and Ibn Gada'iri, who is a person who wrote a book, and in his book, he mentioned many of the transmitters' traditions and said many of them are weak because of exaggerated beliefs, because they're ghulat, right? So these accusations are given less weight than accusations made by, for instance, Najashi or Tusi, who are also big scholars of ilm al-rijal. The Qawmis, right, they considered beliefs that we accept today to be exaggerated beliefs, right? So not isma, but like, the level of the knowledge of the imams, for instance. What's the mainstream Shia opinion today was considered exaggeration amongst the Qawmi scholars in that time, centuries and centuries ago, not modern, right? Now, there's also a huge discussion about what to do when there's conflicting accusations, right? So maybe one scholar says he's an exaggerator, another one says, nope, he had correct beliefs, right? Now, what do we do in this case? Do we accept his trustworthiness? Do we reject his trustworthiness? Do we consider him mubham, or like unknown? What do we do in this case? There's also discussion, right, about whether the accusation about someone being a ghali, someone being an exaggerator, has a bearing on his trustworthiness at all, right? Maybe someone has incorrect beliefs, but does that mean they're a liar, right? So maybe, a large number of mainstream Shia scholars accept a hadith from Sunni transmitters, right? So there's a lot of traditions from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that have a person by the name Sakuni and Nofuli in the chain, and they're both Sunni, right? So we accept them even though their beliefs don't fall within the fold of mainstream Shia Islam. So what about someone who exaggerates, right? Maybe he believes that the imams are on a higher station than they really are, but that doesn't mean necessarily that he's lying about what the Imam said. Right? Maybe the Imam said something and he's quoting him verbatim. If he's trustworthy, if he's someone who will transmit this tradition without changing it, without lying, then can he be accepted as trustworthy, right? So all of these discussions kind of arose because of the existence of the ghulat, of the exaggerators. They wouldn't have even been issues if these deviant ideological beliefs did not exist, right? And there are a lot. So there's more than 3,000 traditions, hadith, that have been affected by this, by people in the chain of narration being accused of being exaggerators. One of the prime examples is one of the transmitters of traditions by the name of Sahal ibn Ziyad, who has been accused of being a ghali, of being an exaggerator. And he has, I think there's probably 2,000 hadith that he's narrated. So a lot of traditions, if you accept him being an exaggerator, and then accept him, accept exaggerators being untrustworthy and just rejecting their traditions altogether, then that's 2,000 hadith that you have to throw out. Right? So it becomes pretty important how we deal with these accusations, right? And this is how these exaggerators harm Islam. It's not that their exaggerated beliefs will become mainstream, but it's the effect that they have on the mainstream in this way, right? So obviously, exaggeration is something that's been rejected, right? In the Quran, in 2 verses of the Quran, right? It's referring to Ahl Kitab and exaggeration, right? So in Surah 4:171 and in Surah 5:77, Allah addresses Ahl Kitab, ya ayyuha, I think I'm missing a word here, but he addresses Ahl Kitab, la taghlu fi dinikum. Don't exaggerate in your religion, right? And remember, exaggeration here, when we're talking about religion, is elevating the position of a prophet or an imam. That's usually how it's used, okay? And who was elevated amongst Ahlul Kitab? Nabi Isa alayhi salam. They elevated him to divinity, right? And that is a prime form of exaggeration. And here Allah is saying, do not do this in your religion. So obviously we should not be doing this in our religion either. So we should not be elevating the station of the prophet or the imams to divinity, right? Obviously that's wrong. There's also a hadith we have. So there's a tradition from our prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are 2 categories, sinfan min ummati, from my religion, who have not received anything from Islam. Nothing. Who? The Nasibi, right? Towards my Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam. So those who fight against the Ahlul Bayt, right? And the word Nasibi we have to really look into the tafsir of that word, because it's not only physically fighting, but the opponents of the Ahlul Bayt, and the Qal, the one who exaggerates in religion, right? So the Nasibis and the Ghulat are put in the same line here in this tradition from the Prophet. And the Prophet is saying both of them even though they claim that they're Muslim, they don't receive anything from Islam. And think about the Prophet saying that about you. What a shame that would be. There's a tradition from Imam Ali alayhi salam, Iyakum wal qulu fina. Refrain from exaggerating about us, the Ahlul Bayt. So this is one of the traditions that the Imam is fighting against those who exaggerate his status and try to put him on a status that is higher than what he actually is on, right? And he spent a large portion, he spent a large amount of time ideologically fighting against these beliefs, right? Now, when you look at it on a theological perspective, right, there's discussions about the attributes of the imams, the virtues of the imams, the miracles of the imams, and so on and so forth, right, which is lesser. And you have discussions about the essence of the imams, which is raising their status above and beyond what it should be. And that's the main, ghulat, exaggerators, or ghulu, exaggeration, that we're discussing, right? So the minor forms we're not really touching upon, the major forms is what we're looking at, right? So this exaggeration in essence, ghulu in essence, okay? And if there's questions, start writing them, because there's not much more in this lecture here. So the ghulu in essence, right, is stating that the essence or the dhat of the imam is considered higher than it actually is. Sometimes all the way up to divinity, right? Where someone is claiming that the imam, a'udhu billah, is divine, is God, basically. Connected to this are those who believe the Prophet and Imam Ali alayhi salam perform everything that's been attributed to Allah. So A, stating that they are God themselves. B, stating that they are godlike, right? So godlike meaning what? That the Prophet and Imam Ali are the creators, right? They are khaliq, right? They're the sustainers. They're the ones who provide sustenance and rizq to people, not in that vertical chain that we talked about before, independently from God. That they're the ones who remove life and give life, right? So all of these are the main, actions that people ascribe to Allah, creating the universe, sustaining the universe, and amongst that, being the one who decides when people are removed from life and when people are provided life, right? And some of these ghulat state that the Prophet or Imam Ali alayhi salam perform this role. So what do mainstream ulama say about them? Okay. There are some questions which we'll touch upon really soon, inshallah. So Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Nobakht, right? He's a 4th century Shia scholar and the author of, actually, here's, trivia night, the oldest existing Shia book on theology, which is called Yaqut, right? And in this book, he says what? He says the beliefs of the ghulat, of the exaggerators, are fundamentally batil, are invalid. Why? Because of the impossibility of Allah having a body, and considering the miracles of Imam Ali alayhi salam to be on par with the miracles of prophets Musa and Isa alayhi salam. So the point here is that if you consider Imam Ali alayhi salam to be God, right, as some like Alawi positions, then you're ascribing a body to God. And that has all the issues that we touch upon in theology, which make it an impossibility. Because if God had a body, then he would be dependent upon that body, and he would not be omnipotent, and he would not be all places at once and all times. Right? So it would provide limitations on God by him having a body. So that is an impossibility. Now, also, he's saying that the miracles of Imam Ali alayhi salam were not on par of the miracles of the prophets of yore, which is interesting. Okay. Allama Hilli, who's more of a modern scholar, but modern not meaning alive today, but more contemporary than Sheikh Nobakht. So Allama Hilli said he acknowledges various groups of this form of ghulu, right? Ghulu in thought, in essence. And he says, there are various groups of ghulat, there are various groups of exaggerators. There are those who considered Imam Ali alayhi salam to be God. And there are those who consider him to be a prophet. All of them are invalid, as Allah does not have a body, right? Saying that Imam Ali is God. Allah does not have a body. And Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was the final prophet. So that negates the belief stating that Imam Ali was a prophet. The mistake they made was that they saw the miracles of Imam Ali alayhi salam and thought he was Allah. But they did not indicate divinity, these miracles. As such, miracles of prophets of the past didn't indicate divinity. For instance, the miracles of Prophet Moses and the miracles of Prophet Jesus were demonstrated, but they're not God, right? These miracles took place. All of the miracles of Nabi Musa, Nabi Isa, right? Huge miracles, but we know that they're not Allah. So the miracles of Imam Ali alayhi salam definitely is not Allah as well. Now, there are many ideological beliefs of the Ghulat, and there's many groups of them, so you can't kind of lump them all into one group. But what I want to do is I want to look at some of the groups, and I also want to look at some of the opinions. So one of the opinions that we're going to look at, inshallah, next week is Sahun Nabi, right? Which is like mistakes or forgetfulness of the Prophet, whether or not he made mistakes, whether or not he forgot things, right? And we also want to look at some contemporary groups of exaggerators, of ghulat, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And now, inshallah, we'll get into the couple questions and then we'll close. So, question number one, is it possible that a part of our current beliefs were affected by ghulat, at least among some Muslims? I do believe that it's possible. Remember that the belief system or Shia Islam that exists today is a compilation, obviously, of the Quran, which has been unaltered, a hadith, which we do have some inserts of traditions that have been influenced by the ghulat, for sure, and the understandings of these sources by our ulama. So there's no, like, you won't come across a marja who says that he knows exactly what the religion revealed by God to mankind was. He has an understanding of what he believes the religion to be taken from the sources. So I definitely believe that some of our current beliefs have been affected by exaggerators, and inshallah, through the tireless work of the ulama, inshallah, some of them can be uncovered and rectified, and whatever has remained, inshallah, would be removed with the reappearance of our living Imam al-Zaman alayhi salam. All right, and the next question. So there were some ghulats present at Imam's time. Do we have an example of them and also the Imam's approach towards them? So yes, we have plenty of examples that 150 transmitters of traditions of the Imams have been accused of being exaggerators, right? Sahl ibn Ziyad being one of them. And these, there's plenty of accusations out there, right? Which ones are valid, which ones are not valid? We have to look into them on an individual basis. Now, the Imam's response to them was definitely negative, right? So the Imam attacked exaggeration. The Imams attacked it because they knew that it would be a method from which the enemies and the opponents of religion could use to attack the religion, right? And it would be a way that deviance would occur with regards to the beliefs about the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So definitely the Imams stood up and opposed it. They spent a lot of time. There's many ahadith that are condemning those who exaggerate their position. So the tradition I meant from, I recited from Imam Ali alayhi salam, Iyakum wal ghulu fina, about us, right? Refrain from exaggerating about us, about the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So definitely they existed at that time. And definitely the Imams opposed that ideological perspective, inshallah. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Inshallah, have a great weekend. And hopefully soon, we'll be able to see each other in person. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you again, Sheikh, for delving into this topic, and we are learning more and more each time. So inshallah, next week we can explore the various views a little bit more. So, and thank you for all you who've been with us past couple of weeks. And same time next week, inshallah, we are still going to stay with the 8:40 time to start, as prayer sort of starts to go backwards slightly each night. Inshallah, thank you again for tuning in, attending, and don't forget to give us feedback. What topics do you want to hear next? What kind of things you like, what we should improve and change for next time, inshallah. And as always, working on these little technical issues that come up from time to time, but alhamdulillah, they are less and less frequent. So please bear with us as we iron some aspects out, inshallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Have a good night and weekend.